both of you, and especially here in this Middle Eastern environment. It's wonderful, isn't it, that we are looking at the Future Hospitality Summit and we have a little bit of focus on Europe as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely, and a little bit of focus on results,
Yes.
which is good as well, because it's fair to say that until quite recently, it was a little bit seen as a poor cousin of the family, wasn't it?
Yes.
So
100%, 100%. If you go back 5 years in time, so before COVID, BC, as it's known. Yes.
Absolutely.
BC, it's at that time nobody was that keen on investing in resorts. You mentioned the word resorts and straight away they go, oh, I don't know about that, there's seasonality, I don't know, this sounds risky. Whereas now, the resorts are front and center for investors. And it's not just private investors, it's also the institutional money, which is incredible. Can you just maybe explain a little bit of what drives this interest? What has shifted in the market?
Well, perhaps I would say what has driven it as far as investors, institutional or family offices are concerned, is definitely resilience. Interestingly enough, and COVID was clearly a trigger in that kind of consciousness. 2020, COVID. Summer 21, we were back at 70% occupancy. 70. 22, we were back to pre-COVID result. 23, best result ever in the company's history in 60 years. Very resilient, very fast recovery, and then it started opening eyes in the industry where at that time projections for downtown hotels were not that exciting.
How do you see it from Hyatt's point of view, Felicity?
I think from Hyatt's point of view, it's probably a very similar story. I think as a company, Hyatt was probably much more recognized, especially in this region and Europe, for city centre, urban and quite large MICE-type hotels serving the business community. So we were very light on leisure. So actually for us during COVID, that kind of exposed in a way, a weakness in our strategy. So Hyatt went full out, and we actually purchased Apple Leisure Group with a large portfolio of all-inclusive, although that's a misnomer I've now learned, is all-inclusive also means there's lots of other rate plans as well.
We'll talk about
which
that.
we'll talk about. So we purchased Apple Leisure Group and to put ourselves into that resort market. So just as we as a brand felt that we needed to diversify our income stream, so we saw investors doing exactly the same. And many investors felt very exposed during COVID because they'd got a city centre-based portfolio. And then coming out of COVID, as we saw the propensity to travel and the excitement for travel and flexibility that we hadn't seen before in people's travel patterns, then the resort market, to your point, has taken off, and Hyatt's seen similar results in terms of the output from our resort portfolio. So it's you know, if you'd have sat at the beginning of COVID and said one of the outcomes of COVID will be that there's going to be a huge demand for resorts, I think somebody would have said you were mad, but it's been a great outcome.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this whole working from anywhere trend and all that. It seems like weekends are now starting on Thursday, they stretch until Tuesday, so people are really spending a lot more time in where they want to be, and that may be a more resorty location versus a city center location. But of course, when we look at resorts in Europe, we're talking about very big variety. So you have the more sand, sea sort of destinations in the south, and then you have the sort of ski destinations in the Alps. What sort of destinations are you interested in, or where would you like to expand your presence?
So for us, obviously, it's an easy win to say we want to expand in the key Mediterranean countries, North Africa, and there's a number of destinations within the Middle East, and we're seeing that tourism growth here in the Middle East as well, and it'll be interesting to see how the Saudi story plays out in terms of tourism. I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to be part of. We're also seeing a lot more mountain destinations, which of course is one of your specialities, Ter. And, you know, so yes, we're looking at a lot of resorts in the sunny climes, but we're seeing a lot more opportunity where private individuals or the types of investors who you were just talking to, looking at mountain destinations, and also kind of more remote retreat type destinations. So across our portfolio of brands, we have brands that fit in with those different types, which allows us to kind of expand our reach into those different markets, which has some benefits for our owners as well.
Yeah.
For us, we are, I would say both. Club Med obviously is very, very famous for the winter resorts, the ski resorts. We have more than 20 resorts in the mountain, the Alps, of course, French and Swiss, but not only. We have resorts out in China and 4 ski resorts in Japan, in Hokkaido. We have also one in Quebec, in Canada. So that's clearly one of our specialty ski resorts. And then the rest of the portfolio, about 50 resorts, will be beach resorts. And again, span all across the world, from again China, Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Brazil, and we look for the right destinations, the right location, but we're looking at expanding on both fronts, increasing and continuing our leadership in the mountain, and developing new destination and discovering new destination.
Now, if we look at it from the, let's say, anti-fragile point of view and creating resilience, do you feel that having this dual destination play, that you can attract the audience in summer in the south and maybe in the winter in the ski, does it really work? I know from the brand's point of view, they've been exploring that for some time now, that from staffing point of view, for example, it may make sense for some of the smaller operators, if you're opening in Europe, maybe do something in Greece and something in the Alps, and then you are kind of, you're building some resilience on with the seasonality patterns. Do you find with Hyatt that there's been sort of this anti-fragile aspect to it?
I think there is. I think to you're alluding in your question, it is limited and it is quite difficult. You can't.
Was it so obvious?
You can't just en masse kind of move a group of employees from a hotel in Spain to a hotel in Switzerland and hope they're all going to be happy with it. They're human beings after all. So I do think it is limited. But I think what we are certainly saying, and I don't know what your experience is, but interested to hear it, is the seasons are getting longer. And certainly in the resort locations, we're seeing the shoulder seasons stretching out. So we're getting more out of those properties in terms of the amount of time we've got them open or that they're at maximum occupancy. And we're doing that by creating more demand through maybe some experiential travel, creating more packages, whatever that might be. And in the snow resorts, we've generally got smaller hotels there, so more boutique-style hotels in Europe. And there it's very easy, again, to stretch the season, looking at how we can leverage other parts of Hyatt's distribution in terms of maybe small meetings, events, incentives, that type of business, to really create anti-resilience that way, as opposed to maybe some of the strategies which are actually, we talk about a lot, but quite difficult to implement.
Yeah, for us, situation has evolved a little bit. It used to be like that. It used to be that we would have some resort in destination, quite seasonal, both winter and summer, and we would actually bring the people from one to the other. There's still a bit of that happening. We still have some summer resort, some beach resorts which are a bit, where the season is a bit short, and then we work with the staff and we bring them to some of the mountain resorts whereby it's a purely winter season as well, and it works well. But in the end, the business model is changing now for several reasons. First of all, having different owners, but each asset needs to stand on its own merit, right, and works on its own merit. So our business model evolved for the beach resort to start with. We no longer develop in destinations where season would be 3 months. It doesn't work, especially not with the type of investment which are required today. Back in the old days, when it was a bunch of huts on a nice sandy beach, you could do it, right, with because the investment was too high. But today, when we're talking, north $100 million for an investment for a beach resort, you can't have that thinking anymore, because if the season is too short, you just don't get the return on the investment. It's figures, right? It's mathematics. So for beach resorts, we now target only destinations where we have the capacity to open 8-9 months per year. All right, sure. Minimum, in order to have that proper return on investment on those destinations. And for mountain resorts, it's quite interesting, because when people think mountain resort, they think skiing, right? And indeed, if you think skiing only, it's a bit short.
Yes, it's
a bit short,
shorter.
Even, and it may even get shorter as years come by. So what we've been doing in the newest resort we've been developing is we no longer consider mountain resort as just and purely skiing, but we consider it as 4 different seasons, actually. Sure. So the infrastructure is slightly different. Now we start having more space, to keep equipment for summer, e-bike, stuff like, swimming pool that can be open outside, and we when we plan the concept of the resort, we now plan for the 4 different seasons, hence edging a little bit as well that risk of snow getting a little bit more scarce.
Yes. I was literally this morning looking at the performance on seasonality on one of the Alps destinations, and it's fascinating because the summer occupancy is actually a little bit higher than the winter occupancy, and this is a very well-known ski destination. Admittedly, the rate is a little bit different in summer, but that's where the build-up has to come from.
It is, and it makes and that's a very good point you touch upon. Holidays, vacation in a winter resort during ski season is high price. It's expensive for people, especially for families, which is our target and our main segment. It's very expensive. And some people may hesitate going all-inclusive for a week for a family of 4 or 5. And then, very often, for a certain segment of the population, the first step into that universe, going to the mountain, going all-inclusive, going with a family, maybe summer. And summer, we can do that appeal price, having a price which is a little bit more affordable for those families to understand exactly what it's all about. And then they discover it and they say, wow, yeah, I would like to experience that, and I understand and I'm ready to pay that premium to go skiing. So it's the appeal price as well. The product can serve as appeal price for that segment.
Entry point.
Entry point, absolutely.
How about for you, Felicity? I find it fascinating that Hyatt wasn't really known as a player in the all-inclusive segment, and similar, like you've made big bets on the resort space in recent years, it's also been on the all-inclusive segment of that. What are your thoughts on why is Hyatt doing it, and is that adding in any way to this resilience piece?
Well, I think it goes to the first point I made, which was, we really, during COVID, felt that we were quite niche in terms of where we were playing. So buying ALG was a very specific way of putting Hyatt at the forefront of the all-inclusive market. And, again, back to the first question, this whole point about all-inclusive is, and the one thing I've learned about it since we've owned the brands, is the rate plans in these hotels are very diverse. Yes. And actually, the great thing about an all-inclusive rate plan, the tour operators will sell that plan. So it gives you a base level of business in a hotel. You can then build on that through your revenue management with other rate plans through the year. So that really, really helps us. And it's not just our all-inclusive brands that we bought from ALG that will then translate into resort environments. We've got some great examples of Hyatt Regency now, for instance, Kotor Bay, which opened a couple of years ago, where we're really flexing our other brands into resort locations. But that comes back to demand from investors. And I think your previous panel was really interesting in terms of the gentleman who was saying about the markets that have opened up, and the areas of interest for investment now are much wider. And so it's allowed brands like Hyatt to work in locations where previously we wouldn't have necessarily found investors interested in investing. But I do think, in going to your point around the return on investment, it's really important to make sure whatever we're doing in that space, we properly plan it to make sure that you are getting the facilities right that allow you to flex the use of the product for as long as possible. Yeah. And it kind of needs to morph during different seasons.
Sure.
And for different audiences as well. So, you really then start to have to think, for us, if we can get in at the beginning of one of these planning processes, is much better, because then we can start to work with an owner to say, well, hang on a minute, we need this space for this audience in the summer, we need this space to be able to do what we need to do in the shoulder season, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, one thing we've heard a lot is that these off-sites are getting very popular. So when you look at from the MICE segment, they don't necessarily want to stay so close to the cities, but they go to resort locations, and these off-sites are very popular. Do we have any burning questions from the audience at this point? I will crack on. Okay, so you're obviously operators, but you also wear the investor hat on at least some of the properties. So can you just talk us through a little bit your criteria, if you're specifically for investor point of view, when you look at the project, what's the sort of things that you look for the project to achieve, in particular from this anti-fragile point of view?
For us, the first thing is accessibility.
Access,
to start with.
Yes.
It's a basic one, but if you cannot get to the place, especially sometimes some people tell us, yes, but there is that brand who has taken that plot of land very nearby, and they're very happy with it. They fly with private whatever it is, or and say, yeah, but how many rooms? It's 16. Fine, but for us, minimum is 300 rooms. All right. So those 300 rooms, you need to bring, you need to be able to bring the people. So that's number one. Number two, so we need to be maximum 2 hours from an international airport. That's what we believe. After that, becoming painful for the families. For those of us who have young kids, try to take a long haul flight plus then stay too long in the coach or whatever, doesn't work. Second very important element, we talked about is seasonality. Okay, very important. Critical even. Third one is, because we are in resorts, all inclusive, and targeting families, who says family say children, and who say children say school holidays.
Yes.
All right. So we want to make sure that the destination we pick will have multiple markets feeders. Okay, because it may be school holiday in Europe, but it's not elsewhere, but that's okay. And then it's no longer school holiday in Europe, but it is in Brazil, or it is in China. All right, and being international enable us to drag on all those markets, but then we need to be in destinations that can talk to all those markets. I'll give you a very, very concrete example. January, on the paper, French Alps, looks like a dead season, right? No British, no French, no German, nobody is on holiday. But you know what? In January, ta-da, school holidays in South Africa and in Brazil.
Yes.
And we have full planes of Brazilians who come and ski with us in January, and we are 90% occupancy. All right, so being able to, being international, dragging those people, and having places, destination, which can be accessible for those ones. Once we have those basic covered, basically accessibility, multiple market, seasonality, then we start having the cherry on the cake, which is of course having the most beautiful beach in a given place, having proper design, having proper concept, working with local and so on and so forth. But those three are the basics.
Yeah, the access is such an important one. We see it obviously in Dubai with Emirates. They've done an amazing job. And it has been a challenge in Europe with some of the resort destinations that in principle the destinations are great and there is even the capacity, but there isn't enough airlift to get the people in during the peak season.
Yes.
So that's interesting. What about for you, Felicity? Is there anything different from what David mentioned that you would look with Hyatt?
So Hyatt has a well-publicized asset-light strategy, so we're not investing directly. Where we've invested our money is in the infrastructure to enable us to help owners and investors bring value to their hotels for them. So for instance, through the investment that we made buying ALG, we've inherited a huge operation based in Spain, who negotiate all the contracts with the tour operators, who for the seasonal hotels, which actually still close, you know, they open and close 40 odd hotels a year. You know, this is a big operational lift. So that's where we've put our investment, is into the operational backbone, which is needed for a lot of resort properties, much more so than some of the urban hotels that we run. They're much more intensive. And the distribution systems that are needed to bring people in. In terms of the investors, we're working with all of the things that you're talking about are super important to them. And I think airlift is a critical one. And the school holiday piece, I mean, I still have it mulling in my mind, and especially as kind of the climate, we do see a little bit of climate change coming, and is whether or not some of the school holidays might change out of some of the traditional dates, and we might see a different spread of school holidays throughout the year, which would certainly change the dynamics of the resort market.
Yeah, so talking about the climate, we've seen, well, it sounds ironic in this room to say that we've had some hot summers in Europe because everything is relative and it's certainly nothing like the Middle East, but nevertheless, the heat in Southern Europe has been quite significant in the past few years, sort of 35, 40 degrees, and people don't want to necessarily go on holidays anymore there. Are you thinking about Iceland or Lapland or some of the Nordic resorts because of the warming climate in the south?
Interesting, Iceland. No, not in the immediate future, I would say. For beach resorts, still, despite some hot summers, families still do enjoy to have to feel that heat, to feel the beach, to feel the water. That's still one key driver for family holidays, especially during summer. And then remember, rule number one, it's seasonality. So even if you have one good month or two good months where you can, it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough. Then what's happening, in April, in March, in May, in October, and also scale. It's one thing to be able to attract a few families who are at the forefront of the way they take holiday. But when you have a resort which is 300, 400, 500 rooms, you need a lot of people. So for all those reasons, we are still quite. We are pioneer in the destination, but provided that they match those criteria, which are very, very really, I cannot stress enough, critical to have good return on investment for our owners. We are also mostly outside of Europe, mostly asset light, and like all operators, we take very seriously the interest of the owners we represent and we manage for. So we advise them, to redevelop in those places where there is not too much seasonality. I'll give you an example. We looked at South Africa. We have one resort under construction there. And they are beautiful places. South Africa is a country which is very, very dear to my heart. I just love it. Beautiful places. If you go to Cape Town during their summer, you will find out we absolutely need to put a Club Med over there. But you know what? Season is too short. So in the end, we determined that the only places where we could do it would be on the eastern coast near Durban, where season was long enough, so that again the investor would have a good return.
And the beauty, of course, of when it's a little bit too hot now in July and August in Southern Europe, it means that March, April, May, and maybe September, October is very beautiful, in fact, so you can
Indeed.
stretch the seasonality.
Indeed.
And that's where the seasonality stretch comes in. We are seeing a lot of smaller hotels coming in some of these northern markets you were referring to, Reykjavik, and beyond Reykjavik into Iceland, some of the Nordic countries, but much more smaller, more boutique, retreat style properties. So I guess that's where our brand ladder helps us in a way, because we have brands that will flex for those types of properties, and then we still have our kind of core resort brands for the Mediterranean countries, where if I look at how the trading's been this summer, there haven't been a large retreat of people wanting to enjoy their Mediterranean sunshine.
Yes, you recently opened a hotel in Helsinki, I think, so it could be like a stepping stone to Lapland.
Yes, we're really very excited about the whole ability to be able to extend in the Nordics, because we hadn't been represented there for so long.
Yeah, great. Do we have any questions? We do, from Amruda.
Surprisingly resilient that you don't have a flag in yet, what would that be? One destination in your region that's on your wish list.
I have one. I have several, but I have one favorite one. As I say, I'm a big fan of Africa altogether, and definitely one place that I would love to be able to do something would be in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, and trying to do a combo of a beach resort with something in the bush, perhaps, to enable families to experience those wonders and people, African people.
What about you, Felicity?
I think mine isn't necessarily a destination as opposed to a brand. So we have a beautiful brand called Alila, which is around sort of barefoot luxury and sustainability. And that's a brand which we're really in the process now of redefining, but we very much would like to expand that out into the entire region.
Beautiful brand, absolutely beautiful. Okay, any other questions? I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to speak with
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.